So, welcome everyone. This is a very auspicious opportunity. It's an opportunity for myself, Reverend Karin Russo, Reverend Karin Einhaus from the New Vision Center, and Reverend Dr. Edwin Viljoen to have a conversation about the science of mind in a year. How did it get started? How is the sequencing selected? What advice do you have? And this is a conversation that allows us to be even more delighted in our experience of the science of mind. So Reverend Karin, do you want to say a little something about how New Vision got connected to all this and our desire to
Yes,
do it?
as in as in many things, right? When there's something in my life that I am wanting a deeper experience of, we invite everybody on the journey. And I have had a not easy relationship with this book. In the past, I always used to say, well, this is my second language, and that's why it's so hard. But come to find out, there are other reasons, maybe. And so and I am still so excited to be on this journey with so many people where we have a chance to talk about it and say, man, this one is hard. I don't get this, or this was amazing, and this is how I heard it. And so my question for you, beloved Reverend Edward, is actually, what was your relationship with this book before you decided to create that guide? That's what I would like to hear about.
Thank you. Well, it's a story that goes back some 40, maybe 45 years ago when I first discovered the science of mind and picked up the textbook and thought you start at the beginning and read through to the end. And I found that completely challenging to do, especially since there were so many ideas in one chapter that organizationally really belonged in another chapter. And it was confusing to me, to say the least. So the first thing I set about doing was rewriting the first four chapters in my own words, so that I could make sense of it. I didn't do it for anybody else. I did it for myself, but people picked it up, and now people use that rewrite, that paraphrase a lot. I wrote it in the style of Cliff Notes to myself. The thing itself, the way it works, what it does, and how to use it. And I was talking to a friend about that who came from the Mennonite tradition, and he eventually became the editor of the Science of Mind magazine. I brought him along with me. And he said, why don't you guys, meaning Centers for Spiritual Living, why don't you have a read the Science of Mind in 1 year, like, we do in the Mennonite tradition for the Bible? And I hadn't thought about it. So I thought, well, why not? That might help it for me if I could read something short every day that was just large enough for me to digest and really dig into. So I was volunteering at the World Ministry of Prayer at the time, and that was located next to Founders Church in the building that we owned there, downtown Los Angeles. And I had the 5 o'clock shift, I think, the very, very early shift. So I would arrive and sit in the booths, and as the East Coast woke up, the calls would start coming in. But I did have a lot of time for contemplation, so I sat with a highlighter and a yellow pad, and I thought, well, if I was to read something from the Science of Mind, and it was Easter, for example, I'd probably want to read about immortality. Or if it's close enough to Thanksgiving, so I went around the book and I looked for things that related to the season. I didn't really think anybody would be picking up my guide or using it. It was completely for myself. So I was a little sloppy in it. Turns out it's become quite popular, and so we leave it, we let it be, and that's the reason for it. I also wanted to put the meditations interspersed throughout to sort of break it up, because some of the ideas are very large, and some of the style of the Science of Mind is so dated that it can feel confrontational. There's a sort of like a bold declaration. This is how it is. No room for discussion. It was a style of the era that it came from. So I broke it up a little bit with the meditations, and that's how it was born. And um, I can't remember who it was that contacted me and said, "Look, people are asking for this," and so we made a bookmark of it and was just mailing it out to people who asked for it, and hundreds were going out. And then Reverend Joel Fortinas, who used to work for Tarcher Putnam, they are the copyright holders of our current edition of the Science of Mind textbook. He contacted me and said, will you sign the rights over to the publishers so we can include it in the textbook? And I said, yes, certainly I would. And that's how it got into there. And I think that's the whole story.
Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm really delighted by this because some of this I did not know, but just feeling like, how did this meditation get connected to this thing over here? And the image of you sitting there at the booths, the prayer, World Ministry of Prayer booths with the yellow pad. For those of us who know what telephones are that used to ring on the desk and what yellow pads are, it's very exciting
You know,
to hear.
this is not really my bookcase. This is a virtual background because my house is under construction. But somewhere behind me is the actual Science of Mind textbook that I used. And I was trying to find it to show you with all my notes going through it.
Oh, that's good.
And as I
Well,
went through it,
I tend to hold up this one, the one that actually is literally falling apart, which was from my, my practitioner and ministry days. So I think we all have like the working copy and then the pretty one as well.
yeah, and I like that term, the working copy, because I think one of the questions was, is there some suggestions for how to read it? I would say the way I approach it, I suggest other people adopt this as advice for reading it. It's an investigation. It's a project. It's not a holy book. It's not a sacred text. It's not like channeled given to us from the Almighty. It's Dr. Ernest Holmes' transcribed speeches, loosely organized by Maud Latham after a certain amount of time. And so it did not go through rigorous editing. So if you read it as from the mindset that this is correct, this is how I should think, this is science of mind, you're going to have what Reverend Karen was talking about, some places where you bump up against things that don't feel right. And there's a very good reason for that. The book is full of circular logic and self-referring ideas, proofs, and it also has scientific claims that have been disproven, and some of them were even contested during Dr. Ernest Holmes' time. The whole chapter on immortality rests on this idea of an ether that connects us all, and it's long been disproven. So if you don't have space to argue with Dr. Holmes, then it can be very tiring. So my approach is to, as you read it, to adapt it to language that works for you. Like, for example, the reading, I believe for today, is it 150? Is that the page for today?
Hmm.
Like right from the beginning, most
150.
most men who believe in God believe in prayer. Well, it's a very bold statement.
Yeah.
And I would, so I read it. Like I say to myself, for goodness sake, it's the 21st century. I should put some effort into inclusive language.
Yeah.
No matter what my personal preference is, I should say people who believe in divinity are likely to have a place in their heart for this thing called prayer. Now that's the right approach for me to go about it, and then I can ask myself slowly with this short bit of reading, what is he saying here that's relevant to my spiritual life? But our idea of prayer change, but as our idea of prayer changes as our idea of God changes. Okay, I don't like it when he talks for me. I like to say, but my idea of prayer changes as my idea of the divine changes. And then I can put a little post-it note there and say, has my idea of the divine changed? Has it grown? Has the idea of the divine changed or grown inside of Centers for Spiritual Living? Is it actually evolving? And so that way, the reading becomes a personal exploration of my consciousness in this world today. This particular reading for today is it's probably one of his cleanest statements about his philosophy of prayer. However, it's written to an audience that was deeply Christian, understood all of the references in the 2 or 3 pages, and didn't need footnotes,
Yeah.
right? So it's just like in the Yoga Sutras, where the description of one of the poses, it just says, sit with your feet straight like a stick. Well, what does that mean? Well, the audience knew all of the subtleties that went with that instruction. They didn't need the minute explanation. Like over here in this, he's got some quotes. He's talking about God, and he says, He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Where is that from? So it's a lovely place to put a post-it note. Where is it from? And is Dr. Holmes using it correctly? Or is he applying a liberal theological interpretation? He was very well known for sprouting poetry in the middle of a presentation and not referring to the author, and sometimes not getting it quite correct. And this is a case of it. And this over here is from the book of Hebrews, and it's really talking about Jesus. And I suppose somebody might say Jesus and God in certain contexts are co-eternal. It's the same thing. So there's more in here. God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him. Where is that from? And so there's a lot of richness. And the way I like to do is I like to stop at everything that I don't know and go find out.
Yeah.
And everything I don't understand. And see, is it possible that my understanding is that my consciousness is not yet ready to receive it? Or is it that Dr. Holmes didn't say it clearly? Or is it that it's no longer relevant? So it becomes very rich. And what I love about Science of Mind is there is no blasphemy in approaching the writing this way. You know, we don't use the word heresy. So to argue with Dr. Holmes is excellent and lovely. So this chapter, deeply Christian, and to be fair, Dr. Holmes considered himself a Christian. He grew up in a Christian household. The very first edition of the Science of Mind magazine had the subtitle, The Science of Mind, a Christian Journal. You know, he later came to understand that that might be too restricting, and there might be people who didn't identify as Christian that could still use the principles that he calls universal principles. And so over time, language became more expansive. Also, we see the expansiveness of his language. If you do read the textbook from the beginning to the end, towards the end, as we get into the Christ consciousness and then to the meditations on self-help, you can see the evolution of his language. Like from the strictly principled Thomas Troward, this is the way it is, this is how consciousness works, this is how law is all the time, to this softer, almost romantic poetry at the end, you know, it gets to the final meditation, like, oh, lover of my soul, oh, keeper of my spirit, none shall separate us, for we are. It's a complete departure from the do. You know, you should say a treatment, and you should be able to go to a doctor and get it measured, and then this sort of personal devotional style emerged. And it can be tract to his discovery, his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm.
So his early life was the Bible, very well trained in it. And then when, if he had the internet, he would have been more informed and he would have loved researching. But he was older, he was already teaching a lot when he discovered the Bhagavad Gita. And he said of it that it was the most beautiful scripture that he had ever read. And you can see the shift in the language, and most pronouncedly in a later book of his, another compilation of essays called Living the Science of Mind. And so you see that shift into what is like mystical poetry really taking hold of him, where instead of here, when this prayer is governed by law, right? He shifts to there is a presence within me. He calls it the friend within. So there's a friend within me. Then he says that is closer than, similar to the Quran language, closer to all the various different ways that he like. So as he became exposed to other faith traditions, you can see the shift taking place. So if we were to go back and read the textbook from the beginning to end, we would pick up that arc. But the way I've done it, you can miss it, because it jumps about. So I just carry on talking if you don't stop me.
This is absolutely beautiful. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to bring this like juicy introduction piece to a close and say thank you, and then we're going to move into our more informal conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was very informative and inspirational. Thank you.